Why was the room so quiet when she entered? No one looked at her, not really. Eyes flickered, then slid away, as if her presence at Shadow Hawk was an error in the system. And maybe it was. A woman with no wings on her chest, no call sign stitched into her sleeve, no hours logged behind a throttle, standing in the same hangar where the nation's most decorated fighter pilots sharpened their craft. The silence carried more weight than words. It pressed against her shoulders like gravity, and she refused to flinch beneath it. Staff Sergeant Maya adjusted the strap of her weathered canvas bag and walked with the deliberate pace of someone who knew the value of measured steps. The desert sun had baked the concrete outside into a shimmering mirage, but in here, inside the cavernous hangar, the air carried the faint scent of fuel, hydraulic fluid, and sweat. This was the smell of aviation, of speed, of combat readiness. She did not belong to it yet, but she had come here to claim it. Her uniform betrayed her. Army fatigues worn from desert deployments, dust in the seams, colors faded by too many days beneath foreign suns. No Navy flight suit. No patches bragging about squadrons or deployments at sea. The other candidates in the hangar, men and women with hardened confidence, wore those stories openly. Patches stitched to sleeves like medals carved into cloth. She had no such decorations. Only scars no one could see, and a quiet determination stitched invisibly into her skin. The instructors were already here. Commander Viper Harrison, graying at the temples, stood like a man carved from decades of war in the sky. Lieutenant Commander Jester wore a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind that hinted at a mind always calculating angles others couldn't see. And Captain Eyeside, razor straight, scanned the group with predatory patience, as if daring anyone to prove they were unworthy of this place. Maya kept her posture upright but unremarkable. She had learned long ago the value of silence, of being underestimated. In Afghanistan, it had kept her alive. On convoys where insurgents watched from rooftops, she had survived because she never looked like the most dangerous one in the patrol. Others carried swagger, and swagger drew bullets. She carried caution, and caution kept breathing. But now, caution might not be enough. "You're here for the transition program," a petty officer had asked at intake the day before, staring at her file as if trying to reconcile two impossible realities. "That's correct," she'd said evenly. "No flight hours, none at all." "Correct." He had frowned, but in the military, sometimes orders came from places above pay grades, and his only role was to obey. So he gave her a form, pointed to a hangar, and added softly, "This place breaks pilots who have been flying since they could walk. If you change your mind, no one will judge you." She hadn't changed her mind. Now she stood with the others, listening as Commander Harrison addressed the group. His voice carried the weight of inevitability. "Welcome to the Advanced Fighter Weapons School, Top Gun. For the next 12 weeks, we will break down everything you think you know about flying. And most of you," he let the pause hang, the silence a blade cutting across the room, "will fail." The pilots around her hardly reacted. They'd heard this before at other programs, other briefings. They nodded, confident, as if failure was a word reserved for others. Maya stood still, her pulse steady. She had failed before, failed at things smaller than this, bigger than this. Failure wasn't what frightened her. What frightened her was the possibility that she might confirm what they already believed, that she never belonged here to begin with. When the briefing ended, the candidates split into groups. Names and call signs floated around her: Phoenix, Shark, Zen. Each carried the casual confidence of years strapped into cockpits, of missions flown over hostile skis. Their stories bled through in every gesture. They spoke of carrier landings in storms, evasive maneuvers under fire, near misses that hardened them instead of breaking them. When her turn came, she simply said, "Staff Sergeant Maya, 82nd Airborne, Ground Support." The silence that followed was heavier than words. They didn't mock her, not openly, but she saw it in their eyes, the puzzle they couldn't solve. Why was she here? Lieutenant Commander read from his tablet. No flight hours, no certifications, no civilian training, nothing. He paused, glanced at her. That's unusual. Yes, sir, she replied. Raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. Instead, he nodded toward the row of FA-18 Super Hornets gleaming on the flight line. These are your birds. They'll tell us if you belong here. The other pilots moved toward their assigned aircraft like men greeting old friends. Maya approached her slowly, reverently. Tail number 207. Up close, the Super Hornet was all angles and menace, a machine designed to kill at Mach 2. She ran her hand along the cool metal of its wing, and for a moment something inside her shifted. Not awe exactly, more like recognition. She began her inspection with the meticulous care of a soldier who had spent years checking rifles and radios in war zones. Tires, flaps, intakes, safety pins. Each detail mattered. Her movements caught Phoenix's eye. "You move like you know what you're looking for," he remarked, half curious, half skeptical. "I read the manuals," Maya said without glancing up. Phoenix smirked. "Which one? There are 15. All of them." Even looked up at that. His expression betrayed the faintest flicker of interest. "All of them." "Yes, sir." She left it at that. Silence filled the gap, and for once it worked in her favor. That night she sat alone in her quarters under the thin yellow glow of a desk lamp, her books and notes spread before her. Outside, the flight line glowed with quiet menace, fighters secured under desert stars. She opened a manual and traced her finger across diagrams she already knew by heart. Her mind was sharp, her preparation thorough, but her hands, her instincts were still untested. At 5:30, her alarm buzzed, though she had been awake long before it. She dressed in the sage-green flight suit issued to her, still stiff from the factory, its fabric carrying none of the casual creases that spoke of hours flown. It felt like a costume, but she wore it anyway. Inside the simulator bay, the room hummed with electronic life. 6 full-motion cockpits stood waiting, machines built to teach without forgiving. Maya climbed into one, strapping herself in with deliberate precision. 47 steps in the startup checklist. She ticked them off carefully, cross-referencing against the mental checklist she had memorized. Switches clicked beneath her fingers, displays glowed to life. The simulator lifted into motion. She advanced the throttle and the jet roared down a digital runway, leaping into an artificial sky. For a moment she almost believed it, but the truth bled through. There was no heat in her chest, no weight pressing her into the seat, no smell of fuel or vibration of engines alive with fire. It was practice. Necessary. Hollow. Her first landing ended in disaster, an abrupt blackout as the simulator declared her dead. The second bounced down the runway, awkward, clumsy. By the 8th, she managed something that could be called a landing, though the computer would not have approved. She reset again and again, her mind cataloging mistakes, her hands scribbling notes, her eyes betraying nothing but focus. When Phoenix walked in, catching her still strapped into the simulator, he gave a half smile. "Getting extra stick time." "Trying," she admitted. "Landing a fighter is like threading a needle while riding a roller coaster. It'll come." He said it lightly, but she felt the weight in his tone. For him, it had come through years of training, hours upon hours in cockpits. For her, it had to come in weeks, maybe days. Later, during formation training, her aircraft drifted. She struggled to anticipate, always a half-second behind, chasing positions instead of commanding them. His voice came through the headset. "Formation flying is anticipation. Don't chase the lead. See what's coming before it happens." She tried, she failed, she tried again. In the post-flight review, her flight path appeared on the screen, a wandering, shaky line compared to the smooth arcs of the others. It stung, but she forced herself to study it, to learn from it. "Methodical, safe," said, "but slow, you'll need to be faster." Maya nodded, taking notes. She didn't argue, didn't defend. Walking back across the tarmac in the heat of the afternoon, the roar of real jets shook her chest. The air vibrated with the sound of engines that demanded precision. She looked up, shading her eyes, watching fighters slice the sky like blades of light. In 2 days it would be her turn. No simulator, no reset button, just her, an FA-18, and the sky that had no patience for hesitation. She felt fear, real human fear, but beneath it, deeper than fear, was something else, an ember that had carried her this far. The quiet, unyielding certainty that she had not come here to prove them wrong. She had come here to prove herself right. Why did her hands tremble when she touched the canopy rail? It wasn't fear alone. It was weight. The weight of knowing that once the engines lit, there would be no pause, no reset button, no kind instructor stopping the world so she could breathe. The FA-18 was alive in a way no simulator could mimic. It would not forgive hesitation. It would not care that this was her first time. Maya had known this morning would come. For weeks, she'd studied, trained, dissected manuals, run through simulators until her muscles ached from repetition. But standing on the Shadow Hawk flight line, staring up at the crouched predator that was tail number 207, she realized nothing in her life had prepared her for the raw immediacy of flight. "Check your harness twice, then once more," Commander Sarah Ghost said beside her. Was calm, steady, the kind of aviator whose voice carried weight because it had been tested in fire. She would fly as safety observer in a separate jet, keeping watch from the sky. "This aircraft will do exactly what you tell it. No more, no less. Be careful what you ask for." Maya nodded, though her throat felt tight. The harness locked. Oxygen line clipped. HUD alignment set. Every connection tethered her more firmly to the machine, and the more she connected, the less human she felt. The engine spooled up with a deep, rising growl. Not the polite hum of the simulator's speakers, but a living roar that shook through her chest. 30,000 pounds of thrust waited at her fingertips, enough to rip her skyward faster than her heart could follow. Tower clearance came routine, sterile in its professionalism. Viper 7 cleared for takeoff, runway 32. Her voice barely wavered when she replied, "Viper 7 cleared." Throttle forward. The fighter surged, a violent push that pinned her to the seat. The runway blurred. Her heart hammered in her throat. At 140 knots she eased back on the stick, and the earth, solid, eternal earth, fell away. She was flying. The first second was nothing like the simulator. It was smoother, too smooth. The ground disappeared with dizzying speed, and she felt her stomach sink as blue sky filled the canopy. At 10,000 feet she leveled off, hands stiff on the controls, eyes flicking between HUD and horizon. "Breathe's voice crackled through the radio. "You're gripping too hard. The Hornet wants finesse, not force. Relax." Easier said than done. Maya forced herself to unclench her jaw to ease pressure on the stick. The fighter responded instantly, steadying, as if it approved of her surrender. They began simple maneuvers. Turns, climbs, descents. Each revealed the gulf between knowledge and instinct. The manuals had told her what to expect, but reality had no pages. The Hornet demanded her full attention, power first, then pitch, fingertip corrections instead of muscle, every error, every hesitation punished. When instructed a 60-degree bank, Maya felt gravity multiply. The weight of her helmet doubled, tripled, pressing her into the seat. Sweat broke across her back. She fought to hold altitude, pulling back, adding power, her vision tunneling slightly as G-forces stole her blood. Good, now the other side. The right turn came easier. Already her hands were learning what her mind had memorized. Already the Hornet was teaching her the difference between theory and truth. 30 minutes passed in a blur of sky and sweat. Then came the approach, landing, the part that made even veterans sweat. Maya followed procedure, downwind leg, gear down, flaps lowered. The fighter bucked slightly as drag increased. The runway appeared ahead, a thin strip cutting through desert. Too far, too small, she didn't trust her eyes. Trust the numbers, guided. Airspeed steady, altitude correct. She repeated the checklist in her head, every word a lifeline. Then at 200 feet the crosswind hit. subtle, invisible, pushing her off centerline. Her pulse spiked. She adjusted rudder, nudged the stick. The fighter wavered, drifted, then steadied. 50 feet. The ground rushed up with terrifying speed. Hold it steady. Small corrections, said softly, almost like a whisper in her ear. The main wheel struck hard, a heavy thump that rattled her bones. The nose followed, the brakes engaged, and suddenly, too suddenly, it was over. She was back on Earth. The tower cleared her to taxi. Her hands trembled, only now revealing the strain she had buried under control. She had landed an FA-18 on her first flight. Not gracefully, not perfectly, but safely. In the debriefing room's expression was calm, analytical. Takeoff and climb, textbook, maneuvering, cautious but safe. Landing, a pause. Firm but effective. Crosswind correction showed instinct. That's rare for a beginner. Maya almost laughed at the word beginner. None of the others were beginners. They were combat pilots, veterans. She was the only one starting from zero. But for the first time since arriving at Shadow Hawk, she felt something different than fear or doubt. She felt possibility. Later, walking back to her quarters, she looked up at the night sky. Faint contrails cut across the stars, fatting reminders of the fighters above. She had touched that sky today. Briefly, awkwardly, but she had touched it. The voices of doubt still echoed, the laughter on the flight line, the skepticism in the petty officer's tone, the quiet glances from her classmates. She let them echo. They were not her burden anymore. Tonight she carried something heavier, but proof. Proof that she could take off. Proof that she could land. Proof that the sky did not care about her past, only her performance. And tomorrow, the real tests would begin. What made them fall silent when she entered the classroom? It wasn't respect, at least not yet. It was curiosity. The same kind of silence that had greeted her since day one, the hush of pilots calculating whether she would survive another week or become another name in the washout pile. Only this time, after her first flight, the silence was sharper, more pointed. She had landed. Clumsy, hard, imperfect, but she had landed. And that alone had shifted something in the room. Maya didn't sit with the clusters of candidates. They had already formed their tribes, Air Force with Air Force, Navy with Navy, Marines with Marines. Patches on their shoulders announced their pedigrees like bloodlines in an old aristocracy. She had none. Her sleeve was blank, and so was the chair beside her. The morning session was tactical theory. Commander, rigid, pale-eyed, merciless, stood at the front. His presence alone silenced even the most talkative aviators. "You've all flown fighters," he said, his tone sharp enough to cut steel. "But you haven't fought in this program's terms. Top Gun doesn't teach you to fly. It teaches you to kill." He let the word hang in the sterile air. Kill. The kind of word others skirted with euphemisms. Engage, neutralize, intercept. Had no patience for euphemisms. On the screen behind him, diagrams of aerial engagements appeared. Arcs and vectors, firing envelopes, missile ranges. He spoke of energy management, of using altitude as currency, of making decisions at 9Gs when vision dimmed and instincts screamed. The candidates scribbled notes, though most already knew this. They had fought these fights in real skis. Maya wrote too, but for her every word was oxygen. She didn't have combat hours in a cockpit. What she had were years of ground combat, ambushes survived, convoys defended, split-second choices made under fire. She knew fear, knew chaos, knew what it meant to make decisions when lives balanced on a trigger. The principles were the same. The environment was different. During the break, Phoenix leaned across the aisle. "Not bad for your first flight," he said quietly, as if the words might be overheard and judged. She didn't look up. It was barely a landing. "Barely counts." He gave a small grin, then returned to his seat before anyone could notice. The afternoon brought the simulator again. This time, dogfighting basics. "Your opponent isn't a machine," told them. "It's a mind, and the better mind wins." Maya strapped in. The HUD glowed, showing her target, Shark, A Marine with years of combat sorties, known for aggression, for never backing down. "Fight on," the radio crackled. Instantly, Shark's Hornet darted upward, climbing hard, trading speed for altitude. Maya hesitated. Her manuals had told her about energy tactics, about not following into vertical climbs unless prepared to counter. But hesitation was death. She pulled back anyway, chasing him, and within seconds she felt the trap close. Her radar warning lit, tone in her headset, she was dead. "Too slow," said flatly. The next round she tried different tactics, lag pursuit, wide turns to maintain energy. She lasted longer, evaded once, twice, but Shark still got her in the end. Missiles, guns, it didn't matter. He was ahead. She was behind. By the end of the session, the scoreboard showed a cruel truth. Maya 0 kills, Shark 5. The debrief cut sharper than the fight. "You're too reactive," said. "You let the fight happen to you. You need to see 2 moves ahead, otherwise you'll always be a target." Maya listened in silence, writing every word, every critique. She didn't argue. Arguing didn't make her better. Listening did. Walking back through the twilight, the desert heat finally breaking, she replayed the fights in her head. The mistakes, the hesitation, the way Shark's laughter had carried through the simulator bay afterward, not cruel but confident, unshaken, the sound of someone who knew he belonged. And she thought of something else. Afghanistan, years ago, the convoy ambush that had nearly ended her, rockets from rooftops, gunfire raking the desert road. She'd been pinned behind an armored truck, soldiers shouting, chaos ripping the world apart. And she had remembered her training, not in flying but in staying alive. One breath, one calculation, one move at a time. She had survived that. She could survive this. The next morning she arrived at the simulator bay an hour early. Again. Alone. She strapped in and reset the scenarios. Over and over she practiced brake turns, high-G pulls, energy trades. The machine killed her again and again, but she logged the data, wrote the mistakes, adjusted the inputs. By the time the others arrived, her flight suit was damp with sweat. Phoenix raised an eyebrow. "You're here before dawn every day." "Some of us need more time," Maya said simply. The next official session paired her against Zen. Calm, precise, methodical. He wasn't as aggressive as Shark, but his discipline was a weapon. This time she lasted longer. She forced him defensive once briefly before he slipped behind her again. Another loss, but's critique was different. "Better," he said. "Still too slow, but better." A single word, better, and in this place that mattered more than applause. That night she sat alone at her desk, the manuals open, the notes stacked. Outside her window, the Nevada desert stretched into darkness, the stars sharp and merciless above. She whispered the maneuvers under her breath, tracing them in the air with her hand like a child sketching constellations. Tomorrow the fight would come again, and maybe she would still lose. Maybe she would lose for weeks. But she had learned something in war. Losing wasn't failure, not if you learned from it. Failure only came when you stopped fighting. And Maya had no intention of stopping. Why did Shark smirk when her name was called? Maybe because everyone already knew what was coming. The day's exercise wasn't just theory or simulation anymore. It was air-to-air practice in real FA-18s, two-ship dogfighting. For most of the candidates, it was just another step in a long career of training. For Maya, it was the cliff edge she'd been walking toward since the first morning at Shadow Hawk. "Pairings for today," announced in the briefing room, his tone neutral, though his eyes lingered on her a fraction too long. "Williams, you're with." The room shifted almost imperceptibly. Phoenix glanced at her, then away. Zen remained unreadable, folding his notes with quiet precision. Shark leaned back in his chair, his grin broadening. He didn't have to say anything. The smirk said it all. This will be quick. Maya sat still, her notes neatly aligned on the desk. She didn't rise to the bait. She learned long ago that silence was its own kind of shield. Outside, the sun was already burning the desert into white fire. The hornets glinted like blades lined on the tarmac. Tail number 207 waited for her, silent and indifferent. Machines didn't care about doubt or ridicule or the weight of other people's expectations. They only cared about inputs, about precision, about performance. Ghost walked with her to the aircraft, her voice calm, even. Remember what we practiced. Stay alive first, kill second, learn always. Maya nodded, strapping in. The cockpit embraced her with its hard edges and suffocating straps. Oxygen line, G-suit, HUD alignment. The ritual was familiar now, but today it felt heavier. Engines thundered to life. The smell of jet fuel and scorched air filled the canopy. Viper 7, Viper 8, you are cleared for takeoff, runway 32, tower control said. Shark's voice came over the radio, too casual, almost mocking. Try to keep up. She didn't answer. Words were wasted fuel. They roared down the runway, side by side, and leapt into the sky. At 10,000 feet, the exercise began. Fight on, his voice crackled in her headset. Shark broke high, climbing hard. She knew the trap. He wanted her to chase, to bleed energy, to stall out so he could dive on her. The manuals had screamed the warning. The simulators had killed her that way dozens of times. Her instinct urged her to follow. Her discipline said otherwise. She leveled, rolled away, extended the distance. For a few heartbeats, the sky was empty. Then his radar lock screamed in her headset. He'd come down behind her anyway, diving from altitude, right where she didn't want him. Fox 2, his voice declared, missile kill. Dead. Again. Back in formation's tone was even. Reset, run it again. They did, and again, and again. Each time Shark found her, sometimes in seconds, sometimes after a longer dance. Her maneuvers grew sharper, her reactions quicker, but the outcome was unchanged. At the debriefing, the big screen displayed their flight tracks. His, clean and predatory. Hers, defensive and scattered. Didn't soften the critique. You survived longer, but you're still reactive. You're flying not to lose instead of flying to win. The words hit hard, but she nodded. Yes, sir. Shark leaned back in his chair, his voice carrying across the room. She's never going to get there. No offense, but this is a different league. Manuals don't teach instinct. A quiet ripple moved through the room. No one contradicted him. No one defended her. Maya kept her gaze on her notes. Her pen moved, steady, precise. She didn't look at Shark. She didn't give him the satisfaction. But later, in the solitude of her room, the words lingered. She opened her notebooks, pages already worn with lines of diagrams and corrections. She replayed every maneuver in her mind, every mistake, every fraction of a second where she had hesitated. And she remembered something else. Another desert years ago, a night convoy in Afghanistan, an ambush that had torn the silence apart with fire and explosions. Radios jammed, men shouting, chaos all around. She had been the ground support specialist, not the trigger puller. But when everything broke down, she had made a call, rerouting comms, coordinating air cover, getting her people out alive. It hadn't been instinct then either. It had been preparation, observation, the discipline to stay calm when others panicked. That was who she was, and maybe that was what the Hornet needed too. The next dawn she was back in the simulator bay before anyone else. Again, alone. She flew the engagements against ghosts in the computer, practicing brake turns, barrel rolls, high yo-yos until her body ached. She wasn't trying to be faster than Shark. Not yet. She was trying to be smoother, more efficient, less predictable. When Phoenix walked in and saw her still flying, he paused by her station. You don't stop, do you? She unstrapped, sweat darkening her flight suit. If I stop, I stay behind. He gave a small nod. Shark thinks you'll wash out. He's probably betting on it. Maya looked at him evenly, then let him bet. The following week, the pairings changed. She wasn't against Shark this time, but Phoenix. The fight was different, less aggression, more strategy, and for the first time something shifted. She forced him defensive. Briefly. Just for a few seconds, his hornet rolled hard, climbing away to regain energy. His voice cut in, "Good, that's what I want to see." It didn't matter that Phoenix eventually got her. It didn't matter that the fight ended with another simulated kill against her. For those few seconds, she had turned the tables. When they landed, Phoenix approached her on the tarmac. He didn't smile this time. He didn't joke. He just nodded, slow and deliberate, a gesture that meant more than words. It wasn't respect, not fully, not yet. But it was the first crack in the wall. What made Phoenix look twice at her that morning? It wasn't the uniform, it was the silence in her movements. The way she carried her helmet in one hand, notebook in the other, every step exact, rehearsed, without wasted motion. Pilots at Shadowhawk were loud by nature, their confidence spilling over in banter, bravado, or the casual arrogance of those who had danced with death and survived. Maya didn't join that rhythm. She walked differently, as if the world around her might vanish if she stepped too hard. Phoenix had seen her lose every dogfight against Shark. He'd heard the whispered bets in the cafeteria, how long before she washed out. 2 weeks, 3, he said nothing. But now, watching her settle into her seat before the briefing, he felt something unexpected, curiosity. The day's training would be squad tactics 2 against 2. The instructors called it mutual support, but everyone in the room knew what it really was, survival. No one wins alone. Explain the exercise in clipped tones. You will fly in pairs against an opposing element. Maintain visual, communicate effectively, and cover your wingman. Lose track of your partner and you're both dead. His eyes flicked briefly to Maya. The implication was clear. For some, the risk of flying with her was higher than facing the enemy. The pairings were announced, Williams with. The room shifted again just slightly. Shark grinned openly. "Good luck, Phoenix," he muttered, loud enough for others to hear. A couple of laughs followed. Maya didn't react. She was already writing the mission parameters into her notebook. Phoenix hesitated, then leaned closer. "You follow my lead, I'll keep us alive." She nodded once, not insulted, not defiant. Understood. On the flight line, the desert shimmered under heat. The hornets gleamed like predators ready to pounce. Tail number 207 waited for her again. She climbed the ladder, strapped in, and ran her checks with the same methodical rhythm as always. Engines roared, radios crackled. Viper 1, Viper 2 fight on. Chen and Shark moved like wolves, coordinated, aggressive, closing fast. Phoenix's voice cut sharp over the radio. "Break left, now." Maya rolled, pulled, felt the G's crush her chest. The world tunneled, the horizon slicing across her canopy. Phoenix's hornet flashed into view, angled opposite, their maneuvers mirroring. She forced her breathing steady, fighting to keep the enemy in sight. "Zen's on my 6, Phoenix called. "I see him," Maya answered, and she did. Training, diagrams, hours of simulator drills, they fused into something sharper, clearer. Zen slid across her HUD, his angle tightening. For a split second, instinct told her what to do. She rolled high, pulled a climbing turn, cutting across Zen's path. He adjusted, but too late. The missile tone screamed in her headset. "Fox 2, she called. "Kill." Her heart slammed against her ribs. It was just an exercise, simulated missiles and programmed radar locks, but it was real enough. She had taken a kill. Shark's laughter cut over the frequency. "Lucky shot, don't get cocky." But his voice was now. Moments later, Shark swung behind Phoenix, pressing hard. Phoenix jinked, rolled, bled speed, but the Marine stayed glued to him. "Get him off me," Phoenix barked. She saw it, the trap forming, Shark closing for the kill. Her stomach knotted. She failed in this moment before, every time. But this time something shifted. She didn't think, she moved. Throttle forward, nose down. The Hornet screamed through a dive that pinned her into the seat. The world blurred, but her sight stayed locked on Shark. He never saw her coming. Her HUD lit, tone steady. "Fox 2. Kill." Silence filled the radio for 2 heartbeats. Then's voice came calm, even. Good call, aggressive, effective. Her breath shuddered out. Back on the ground, the debrief played the tracks. Her vector arced like a blade across the screen, cutting into Shark's blind spot. 2 kills marked beside her name. Not luck, execution. Looked at her directly for the first time in days. Better, much better. Phoenix leaned back in his chair, arms folded, his expression unreadable. But when the others filed out, he lingered. That second move, he began, then stopped, shaking his head. You saved me up there. She met his eyes evenly. That's what a wingman does. He nodded slowly, almost reluctantly. But in that small nod, something had changed. That night, alone in her room, Maya stared at the stars over the Nevada desert. Her body ached, her hands still carried the ghost of the stick's pressure, and her ears echoed with Shark's laughter, cut short mid-flight. She had been underestimated her whole life. Today, for the first time, she had answered not with words, not with explanations, but with action. Respect didn't come quickly in places like Shadow Hawk, but tonight she had earned the first fragile edge of it. And she knew one truth with certainty. The sky only respected those who fought for it. Why did the radio go dead at the worst possible moment? Maya's hands gripped the stick than usual as her Hornet banked into the blue. The day's drill was a high-pressure intercept scenario, 2 aircraft against a fast-moving target. It was meant to test communication under stress, the invisible thread binding pilots in formation. For veterans, it was routine. For Maya, it was a tightrope strung high above the desert floor. Phoenix was her wingman again. Their last mission together had shifted something between them. He no longer treated her like a passenger, not yet an equal, but not dead weight either. Now, though, as the simulated hostile darted across their radar screens at supersonic speed, his voice cut through the headset, calm but sharp. 2-ship formation, I'm lead. Your high cover, stay on me. Copy, she answered. For several minutes, everything went smooth. The target juked, rolled, dove, its pilot skilled, forcing them to adapt. Phoenix handled it with steady precision, calling maneuvers with clipped commands. Maya responded instantly, her Hornet carving the sky in tight arcs, their formation holding. Then silence. Mid-turn, as Phoenix banked hard left, his voice cut out. No crackle, no command, nothing. Her HUD flickered, then steadied. Radios had failed. Not his fault. Not hers. Just the kind of cruel malfunction that could turn practice into disaster. Phoenix, do you copy? She tried, but the line was dead. The simulated hostile didn't care. It closed in, circling wide to split them. Alone now, she had seconds to act. Fear clawed at her throat. The old fear. The one that said she didn't belong here, that Shark was right, that instinct couldn't be learned from manuals. For one blinding second, she almost froze. Then another memory surged. Afghanistan, the night the comms had failed during an ambush. Radios nothing but static as fire lit the convoy. She'd found a way then. Improvised, adapted, refused to let silence kill them. This was no different. Her eyes locked on Phoenix's jet. He was moving sharp, aggressive, but without her cover, he was exposed. She read his intentions in the tilt of his wings, the speed of his dive. He was pressing the target low. She moved high. Her Hornet screamed upward, then rolled inverted, bleeding altitude into a diving slash that lined her perfectly behind the hostile. HUD lit. Missile tone steady. Fox 2, she whispered to herself. Kill. The radio came alive again with static. Phoenix's voice snapped through. Where the hell? He cut himself off as his radar painted the hostile dead. Silence then. Nice work. When they landed, Shark was waiting at the flight line, arms crossed, smirk ready. Heard your radio died up there. Guess Phoenix flew solo after all. Phoenix's reply was sharp, uncharacteristic. She covered me, nailed the target when I couldn't, saved the fight. Shark's grin faltered just for a moment. He looked at Maya differently now, not with respect but with something else, unease. In the debriefing, kept his tone even but his eyes carried weight. Quick adaptation under failure. Good. That's the kind of thinking that wins fights. For Maya, the words landed deeper than any compliment. Adaptation, survival, those were her languages. That night the barracks were unusually quiet. She sat at her desk, helmet beside her, manuals closed for once. Outside, the desert wind rattled the thin windows. She thought of her silence on that radio, the old fear rising, the way she had shoved it back down and acted anyway. It wasn't instinct she lacked, it was belief. And slowly, painfully, she was starting to believe. What made the sky so quiet, just seconds before everything went wrong? It was supposed to be routine. A training flight, 4 Hornets in diamond formation, climbing over the desert ranges to practice close maneuvering. Maya's breathing was steady, her grip on the stick loose but ready. The air shimmered above the Nevada heat, contrails etching pale scars into the sky. For once she wasn't nervous. For once she felt the formation around her like a rhythm, Phoenix steady on her right, Shark above, Zen below. Then the warning lights flashed. A sharp tone blared in her headset, hydraulic pressure dropping. She froze for half a heartbeat, then snapped into procedure. Control issue, she reported, voice steady though her pulse spiked. Hydraulics low, aircraft responding sluggish. Phoenix's voice was calm, clipped. Stay with it, you've got this. But Shark's tone cut sharper. She's gonna lose control, break her off now. The Hornet shuddered under her hands. Control surfaces lagged, the jet rolling lazy where it should have been crisp. Panic pressed at the edges of her vision. If the hydraulics failed completely, she'd be a passenger strapped to a falling machine. Maintain altitude, his voice ordered from the ground. Calm, professional, but edged with urgency. Run emergency procedure Echo 9. Her training screamed through her. Checklist, shut off non-essentials, systems, manual backup. She ran through the steps with rigid precision, sweat dripping under her helmet. The Hornet steadied barely, but the margin was razor thin. The others had pulled wide, circling above her like hawks. Shark's voice cut back in, impatient. She won't make the runway, call the chute now. Maya's jaw tightened. The ejection handle sat beneath her hand, a salvation and a surrender all in one. But another voice rose inside her, quiet, certain, the same voice that had kept her alive on nights when everything burned. Not yet. Negative, she said firmly. I can bring it back. For a heartbeat, silence filled the frequency. Then Phoenix's voice. I've got your wing, we'll do it together. The desert runway stretched impossibly small in the distance, heat shimmering around it like a mirage. Every second the Hornet fought her, slow to respond, threatening to roll, threatening to die. But she adjusted, anticipated, coaxed. Not brute force, not desperation, finesse. Altitude bled. The approach came fast, too fast. You're high and hot, warned. She whispered to herself, steadying her breathing. Come on just a little further. At 200 feet the Hornet wavered, nose dipping hard left. A gasp rose in her throat. Instinct screamed eject. But she rolled opposite, eased throttle, trimmed hard. The runway loomed. Main wheels struck hard, jarring but real. Nose down, brakes. The fighter screamed across the tarmac, slowing until finally, impossibly, it stopped. The radio erupted. Phoenix's voice, sharp with relief. She landed it. She actually landed it. In the tower, silence held a moment longer before its tone returned, quieter than usual. Good work, damn good work. When she climbed from the cockpit, her legs shook so badly she almost stumbled down the ladder. The ground crew rushed to secure the aircraft, chattering about hydraulic leaks and system failures. None of them mattered in that moment. Shark stood nearby, helmet tucked under his arm, expression unreadable. For once, no smirk, no mockery. He just looked at her, long and hard, then gave a small nod, a gesture stripped of arrogance, stripped of games. Respect real this time. That night Maya sat alone in her quarters, the memory replaying again and again. The warning lights, the shuddering jet, the mirage runway. She thought of how close she had come to pulling the handle, to surrendering sky to parachute silk. She thought of how easily fear could have stolen everything. But she hadn't surrendered. She had stayed in the fight. And in the silence of the desert night she realized something. Belonging wasn't given here. It wasn't granted by patches or pedigrees or call signs. It was taken, one heartbeat at a time, one impossible choice at a time. Today she had taken it. What was left to prove, after a landing like that? The answer came faster than anyone expected. Shadowhawk didn't wait long before handing its pilots their next trial, because in the real world the sky never waited either. Emergencies, missions, combat, they arrived uninvited. And tonight, as darkness fell over the desert range, the instructors gave their order. Night operations, for-ship strike simulation, live coordination under blackout conditions. The briefing was short, sharp, clinical. Targets lit on the map like red stars, enemy radar, surface batteries, interceptors to evade. It wasn't real combat, but it was the closest thing Shadowhawk had to offer. The kind of test that burned truth out of pretenders. Maya sat at her station, helmet resting on the desk, listening. She felt no arrogance, no relief, not even the buzz of recent respect. Only a steady, pulsing weight. She knew one truth about proving yourself. Yesterday's survival meant nothing to today's sky. They launched just after midnight. The desert was a sea of black, broken only by distant lights and the faint silver spill of moon. 4 hornets rose into that vastness, Phoenix lead, Shark and Zen paired, Maya on the far wing. Radios kept to clipped whispers. Targets appeared. Maneuvers began. Everything moved with clockwork precision. Until the interceptors arrived. Radar pinged them first, fast movers closing high, simulated hostiles running hot. The exercise had shifted. No longer a calm strike. Now it was survival. Break, Phoenix's voice cut across the frequency. The formation scattered. Tracers lit the dark, simulated round streaking past. Maya rolled hard, pulling G's that pressed her deep into her seat. Her vision tunneled black at the edges, her breath sharp and shallow. Zen's hit's voice called from the ground. Simulation only, but it meant Zen was out. 3 against 2, with Shark's jet pressing a desperate climb. Phoenix, I've got your 6, Maya snapped, diving to cover him. The hostile AI was relentless, pressing angles that punished hesitation. Her HUD blared warnings, missile tones shrieked, her mind raced. She pulled high, rolled, dove, every maneuver she had studied, drilled, sweated into her body. Shark's voice broke across the chaos, sharp, ragged. Damn it, I'm defensive, he's all over me. She saw it, his hornet pinned low, hostile climbing into perfect kill position. For one frozen second she felt the weight of every laugh, every dismissal, every word he'd thrown at her. She could let him fall. She could let the simulation kill him. But the choice wasn't about him. It was about the sky, and the sky had no patience for grudges. She rolled inverted, dove hard, throttles to the wall. The hornet howled, slicing through the black like a blade. Her HUD lit the hostile perfectly, tone steady. Fox 2, she called, her voice even. Kill. Shark broke free, his jet steadying. For once his voice carried no mockery, only silence. The fight raged on. Phoenix pressed forward, dropping on the final target, and Maya shadowed him close, killing another interceptor with a snap turn and clean lock. By the time called terminate, her chest heaved, sweat dripped down her back, and the desert night spun around her like a dream. Back on the runway, the 4 jets rolled to a halt. Engines whined down, canopies lifted, and the silence of the Nevada desert swallowed them. The instructors waited near the tarmac, expressionless. Debrief would come later. For now, it was the other pilots who mattered. Zen, still calm despite his loss, clapped her shoulder as he passed. Phoenix gave a quiet nod, his approval unspoken but clear. And Shark stepped close, helmet under his arm, eyes sharp but steady. "You didn't have to take that shot," he said. Maya met his gaze, calm, certain. "Yes, I did." For a long second he held her eyes. Then slowly he raised his hand, not mockery, not sarcasm, but a gesture clean and stripped of pride. A salute. The moment hung there in silence. No laughter, no doubt, just the quiet weight of acknowledgement. Later that night, alone in her quarters, Maya stared at the desert sky. The stars burned cold and sharp, endless in their distance. She thought of every step it had taken to reach this place. The ignored silences, the clumsy landings, the hard defeats, the nights of sweat and failure. She thought of the hydraulic failure that nearly ended her, the grudges she had outlasted, the choice she had made to save someone who had never believed in her. And in that reflection she understood something deeper. The fight had never been against the others, not against Shark, not even against the sky. The fight had been against surrender, against the voice that said she wasn't enough. She smiled faintly in the dark, a smile no one else would see. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.